All right, we're live apparently.
Yay!
All right, we apparently have two viewers. One of our players has not yet arrived, but for those unfamiliar, hi. I'm John McCord, or JD if you prefer, and I'll be GMing this bang, however it is. Currently joining us, we have the effervescent Taylor. Say hello, Taylor.
Hello.
And until we actually get started, I guess we'll be taking questions.
Put it up to 68. Okay, thank you.
We've got a little bit of background music going. That's mostly for my players, i.e. the people who bothered to show up in person, which means Brandon, if you're listening, and I suspect you're my one viewer. That's your fault for living across the country.
It is his fault.
You already recording?
Yes, we're live. Would you like to join us at the table, Don?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm busy cooking, so there's no point.
Well, you're going to have to be over here at some point.
I will. After I'm done cooking.
I suppose because it's the internet, in the meantime, have a cat.
Is she up on the table?
Yeah.
She is.
She is.
Aw, look at her. She's being adorable.
Yes.
She's like, I'm a star. I have to get in on this.
Once we're right and truly started, I'll jettison the cat from the table so that she doesn't destroy everything.
Cats don't do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, especially this one.
sure. I believe that, definitely. We've gone back up to 2 viewers, so that's super duper fun.
Because the cat.
Yeah, in the meantime, yeah, definitely. Probably was the cat, actually.
The cat is cuter than you.
Well, yeah, I mean, have you looked at my face?
Yeah, I know.
Anyway,
That's why I only kiss you. That's why I only make love to you whenever it's dark.
so Taylor, while we're waiting, is there any, are there any questions that you'd like to go over? Or does it all seem pretty straightforward?
So far, it seems pretty straightforward.
All right. Would you like to marvel at my extensive D&D book collection?
I would love to.
Okay. Well, for the viewers, because we are waiting, we've got, of course, the core rule books. I'll just go ahead and remove those from the stack. We've got Vola's Guide to Monsters, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Is it Kanan or Kynan? You know what? What's his name? Chris Perkins recently confirmed it was Mordenkainen. So I've been saying it wrong my whole life.
Mordenkainen?
Yeah, it's Mordenkainen.
Kainen?
Yeah. So, all of those Mordenkainen spells like Magnificent Mansion and what is it? Watchful Dog, I think.
Yeah.
Been saying those wrong the whole time. My entire D&D career has been just a facade because of that fact. Anyway, but yeah, those are supplemental materials. They're not necessary to the game, but they some amount of content from each of those is going to be making a little bit of an appearance. Mostly just the game mechanic stuff, like the order domain from Guildmaster's Guide.
Ding dong.
Don, could you get that?
Nope.
I believe Don has actually selected a sub-race for Tiefling out of Mordenkainen's. Taylor, you're playing an Eladrin, right? Also out of Mordenkainen's?
Eldrin, I don't know what book it's from.
Yeah, Mordenkainen's. Yeah, it's
Modern Canaans.
sure. To anybody who is expecting like actual production value out of this thing, I'm sorry to disappoint, but I'm an asshole with a webcam. That's more or less where it all begins and ends. We have Garrett joining us. He was the last one that we were waiting on. Except technically, are you camera shy? Should I not put you on camera?
No, I'm fine on camera.
Okay, well, the camera's rolling and we're live. I've been more or less.
They put you on the
That's
spot.
Garrett.
Hello.
This lighting is not very conducive to recording, but it's what we got.
Oh well.
That's a yellow light.
Gosh, I love seeing piles of manuals.
Yeah, right.
It's inspirational.
Gets me out of bed in the morning. Don, do you have your sheet?
Yeah.
Could you bring it to the table?
Yeah.
Okay. That sheet is yours. Would you like a pencil?
Yes.
All right. All right. So you already went through and did a lot of your character stuff ahead of time. We had an impromptu meeting. I think it was Friday or was it Thursday night?
Thursday. No, Wednesday.
Was it Wednesday night? I don't remember. Anyway,
Thursday I had D&D.
that's right. Yeah, Wednesday night, because Wesley wasn't going to be able to make it to tonight's session, we went ahead and rolled up. And since Taylor was nearby at the time, we just said, why not wander on over?
I guess I'll sit next to you.
That's up to you.
I sat next to you.
Entirely of your prerogative.
Well, someone next to sit near your ugly mug.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose.
Pops, you're not saying hi to Garrett.
All right.
Say hi. Look at him.
I won't bite.
So,
Attack.
as the first order of business,
Good
we'll
person.
attend
You should go over there.
We'll attend to those who have not yet finished rolling up. So, let's see.
Just sniff out your bag.
It's got kitty smell on it.
Get him.
All right.
Yeah,
Do, 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 do.
Such a pretty cat.
Just to sniff your whole bag. I should come to you eventually.
Did you send me your character stuff in a private message or was that posted publicly? Because I know you sent your backstory.
The backstory I sent private.
Yeah.
I think the
The rest of it was public, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe so as well. All right. I believe you went. Let me just open up that document real quick. This is real exciting content for the viewers. All two of them.
Show some skin.
Anyway,
That's
All right,
what
so
the
you had-
tipping's for.
you'd selected the ability score set 16, 13, 11, 10, 8, 7.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Do you need me to rattle those off slower?
No, I'm
You're pulling it up on your own.
pulling it up on
Okay.
my phone.
And I see that you went with the human variant, which gives you a feat at first level.
Yes.
You are aware that there is a non-variant that just gives you +1 across the board to your stats.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm aware.
And we already covered all of the all of your secret character bonuses for connections within the village. Would you believe you're the only one that that cuddled up to the Hellhogs?
Really?
Yes.
I thought they would. I was afraid they were the more like obvious choice because they're like against the head people of the town
Rebels.
in some
some
fashion.
fashion. Yeah. No, I don't know. Like half the party was like, you know what? Those truds seem like good people.
What?
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Well, I guess
I was
that
just neutral.
I don't know. 2 members of the party were like, yeah, I guess my character would be on the up and up with these people, and the truds were part of those. So,
Well, it's very useful, I imagine.
well, the thing is with the townsfolk and your connections to them, there's no wrong answer unless you're looking for a very specific feature to gain from an NPC. I was surprised that only one person chose to buddy up with Gurik, the old retired mercenary. Yeah. So
That is very
yeah,
surprising.
I found
actually.
that rather interesting. For those wondering, the background music, if you can even make it out on the broadcast, is "On the Shore" by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech, because royalty free. Don't sue me. I suppose I should do a little bit of background for the viewers. So, no, you keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. This campaign is going to be a little bit on the unusual side, because if you're going to broadcast something onto YouTube, there's got to be some kind of appeal to it, right? In addition to utilizing a custom world that I've created, because why rest on all of the hard work that tried and true experts have put into the game over, a span of time greater than that of my own life, right? Why do that? That's senseless. We're also going to be playing a classless game. Instead of gaining levels and gaining features based on the levels that they take, I've created a system by which players will be purchasing features and proficiencies and whatnot via points. At this point in time, the party has started with a couple of small benefits, as well as having 4 points to spend right off the bat. Now, to bring all this up, because we're watching Garrett roll up, or rather convert from electronic to paper, his character. And I suppose I could stand to turn the camera a little bit his direction so that people can see him diligently writing stuff. Good. You can see approximately 25% of my face in frame. That's all I ask. All right. So among your... and for the people wondering, the ability score set 16, 13, 11, 10, 8, 7 sounds pretty low and bad. That's because all of them are bad. That one adds up to a total 65 of points. Normally what you're looking for in a D&D character for your starting ability score set, on average, is going to be between 70 and 80 for some frame of reference. The first ability score set, which, unbeknownst to most people, is the set that I intend for people to use whenever I post an ability score set for people to take, was 14, 14, 13, 10, 9, 7, which adds up to 67 points. One of the other alternate ones that I put up for grabs was 13, 13, 12, 12, 11, 9. The reason for this is a narrative one. The players will be taking control of characters that are essentially dirt farmers, or something analogous to that. I believe we have a hunter-trapper from Garrett's side, Wesley is going to be playing a town guard of sorts. I have no idea what Taylor or Dawn are doing. No, Dawn said she was going to be playing some sort of trader of sorts. Tinkerer mostly, though.
Yeah. Or you just go out and sit.
Let's see. To that end, the characters will be starting with 2 beneficial features that they gain based on what villagers they decided to bond their characters with. There's no upper limit, but if you did select that you were familiar with all of the villagers, it was implied that your character is a native of the village that we're starting in. Caliph is the name of that village. Other than that, characters begin with 5 plus Constitution modifier hit points, 2 skill or tool proficiencies, 1 saving throw proficiency, 2 simple weapon proficiencies, and 4 points to spend on anything in the system that I put together. If I can be arsed, I might post that somewhere else later.
Dinner's done.
But
Thank you.
while most of the party didn't bother to spend any points. Hey, babe.
Hey.
Could you get me a plate of 1 chicken, some scalloped squash, and a couple of bits of broccoli?
No.
Just some rice.
No.
Do you want anything to drink?
I have a water.
Okay.
Anyway. Treating significant others like we're in the 1950s aside.
Wow.
No, right? I said please.
Wow. You're getting the worst squash.
I expected as much. Anyway, I was half expecting most of the party to not spend any points on hit points because I don't know. I just didn't expect anybody to really think that far and decide to buff themselves up. But Wesley went ahead and bought 2 hit point upgrades right off the bat.
I didn't.
Yeah, he's starting with 27 hit points.
A madman.
What a madman. He has scant else for features. So that's good. MTG memes. Anyway, players do not have to spend all of the points whenever they receive points. They may choose to spend unspent points on long rests. But as we'll cover in the section where we're going over variant rules, we'll be playing with the gritty realism variant rule from the Dungeon Master's Guide that says short rests are 8 hours and long rests are a week. That said, there's also going to be a hefty amount of downtime in this campaign. I'm talking like in between adventure arcs, the players might have time to fix up their home base, spanning weeks, months, in a couple of cases, I'm sure, as deemed appropriate, possibly even years. Also, as mentioned previously, most of us have already gone and rolled up previously because it just turned out that Wednesday was a good night to meet and do that. I'd been planning to do it with one person, and then another person was like, well, if you're doing it then, I might as well do it then with you as well. And then a third person was also like that.
You don't want me to get your plates?
I can get my own plate.
I'll get mine in just a moment. Thank you.
This is 2019.
Right? It's not 1950 anymore, JD. God! Anyway. Jesus Christ. We maybe should have cut these chicken breasts in half before we cooked them. Might have been helpful because this is a monstrous piece, and I ate not too long ago.
GM needs their calories.
No, not really. I'm a lazy piece of shit that just lays around all the time. I need maybe 500 calories a day. On the topic of calories, not everybody needs 2,000 a day. That's an old figure from a way long time ago when everybody had to like do 500 jumping jacks to be considered a human being.
Oh yeah. Also, the food pyramid is a lie. A
Oh, yeah.
filthy, scandalous lie.
Thank you for tuning into D&D, where we tackle real world lies you're told. All right. Okay, so you don't have any questions about any of the character stuff?
Nothing comes to mind.
Okay. In that case, go ahead and get your food, and once you've got your food, we'll actually start like in full force.
No, thank you.
Dawn fixed my plate, and it shows that she's like trying to treat me like I need to put some meat on my bones.
You do.
Dawn's
That's one
made,
of the biggest pieces of chicken.
yeah, I know. It's massive.
There's my plate.
Dawn's clearly trying to fatten me up, guys. Because if there's one person that you can count on to take care of yourself, it's your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
But no, unhealthy practices aside.
Like eating sweets.
Welcome to D&D, where you watch a bunch of other people eat food.
Or you get fattened up and then you work it off and get some muscle.
Okay, do I look like the kind of person that works out regularly?
No.
I mean, I used to be, but that was back when I had I spent 4 days a week at college and had 2 hours of time in between each class and had nothing better to do than lift.
Yeah, I understand that.
Do what?
You couldn't masturbate.
Do you even lift?
Oh, nope, I still did that on campus.
I know.
Yeah, plenty of time.
Plenty of time to do that. Deviants aside, welcome to D&D, where we talk about the screwed up shit that we did in college. All right. So now
Oh, I
that
cut
everybody
that
has
chicken
food,
perfectly.
now I'm going to ask you questions so that you can talk while you eat.
I cut it with a fork.
Uh-huh.
It's real good. You did good.
Yes.
I told you you always make it better than I do.
Well, it
Is
was
that a
double
plus
that.
one fork?
Hmm?
Plus one fork?
All right. So I've already covered that we're going to be doing a homebrew system wherein there are no classes and therefore no rules, so things will get unhinged pretty much immediately. I'm expecting somebody to just save up points until they can get 3rd level spells and then take action surge and just defeat everything immediately. The counterbalance to that is that in order to do that with any amount of expediency, you also have to not buy hit points. And you know me, I like my combat just as much as the next GM. It is, in fact, my specialty. Lots of players have reported that I really make combat challenging. And that's not me tooting my own horn, although I will do that.
Yeah,
I
last
just need-
campaign I was in that you DM'd. It was challenging.
Yep. Yeah, I remember there was a string of combats where your character hit the ground like every fight.
I would have died if not for that cloak.
Oh yeah, that cloak made the difference. Man, I put that intelligent item in there, and then the rest of the party was like, "We don't want this. This sounds worthless." And Taylor was like, "What are you guys talking about? This is the most clutch thing that he's put into this campaign. This might be the MVP item."
It was.
The day when Atlas became mighty.
Taylor was like, "Wait, it casts Cure Light Wounds on you whenever, like, the first time you go down in a day?" Yes, I'll take this.
And then teleports you away from danger.
And it can teleport you away from danger. Sure, there's the downside that it's an intelligent item that might teleport you away from stuff if it gets scared.
Yeah.
Anyway, build flaws into your magic items. That it's hilarious.
Yeah, Brandon.
All right, so first off, we're going to go over a little bit of what I expect from the table while we're playing this campaign. Above all, rule number one is have fun. We're here to play a game. At the end of the day, no matter how invested we are, this is a game. And I understand if life comes up, just let me know, preferably 24 hours beforehand if you're going to be absent.
Have a job.
Right, yeah. And if for some reason you're not having fun when you feel like you should be, let me know. Obviously not every session is going to spotlight your character. But one of the reasons that I made the party as small as it is, 4 people is considered small by today's standards. Whereas I believe the average back in the day was 3 to 4 players instead of 4 to 6. So 5, in other words. But one of the reasons I made the party this small is so that we can have more moments of spotlight without spreading them too thin. Because everybody enjoys the limelight. So, give more people more opportunities, I say. But yeah, if you're not having fun, talk to me outside of session preferably. But if it's like something glaringly offensive to you, then feel free to confront me on stream.
I'm not having fun.
Wow, Don, thank you. All right. Secondly, I do want to secondly, I suppose I should say, first address that by no means is this a porn campaign, but I do try to present a healthy amount of realism in my games, no matter what shape that takes, and that includes giving a healthy amount of portrayal to whatever vices characters may or may not have.
It was a big piece.
Right.
That happened on camera.
That did happen on camera. Would you like me to turn the camera away from you while you eat?
No, I don't care if people see me as a beast.
All right, cool. So while I do plan on keeping things classy, like I'm not at the table going to describe, in graphic detail, like sexual acts or brutality of great amounts. There will be some amount of use of the fade to black mechanic, wherein I'll say, "All right, now, meanwhile," and so there will be some amount of that. And thirdly, I've been GMing for quite some time. This is not my first rodeo. Best GMs always take an attitude of rolling with the punches. I will try to yes and to the best of my ability, and when I can't do that, I will yes but you.
Kinky.
To some degree, I'll try to work with you to make the story as satisfying as it can be. And in return, I ask that you respect the rules and the authority that I command at the table. If something seems odd, or if it's not going exactly your way, just trust that I'm attempting to make the story as satisfying as it can be. Or in other words, I got you, DB. All right, now that that's done with, does anybody have any questions about any of that?
In terms of content, what are your boundaries? What do you consider taboo, if anything?
Not a whole lot.
Where would you begin to feel uncomfortable?
That's a hard one.
Yeah, that is a hard one. There's not a lot of places that I haven't been really willing to go. I've played characters at the table before who are survivors of abuse victims, abuse situations. And while most other players in role-playing moments have chosen to kind of shy away from those aspects, I tend to embrace them. I'm willing to portray a wide number of ugly and unhealthy situations through role-playing because, in my opinion, one of the great uses of role-play as a tool is that it can help people either compartmentalize or deal with things that they've had happen to them in their life. And while I've not necessarily been the survivor of abusive situations, it is for me a chance to stretch my legs and see what I am capable of portraying as a role player. That said, we likely won't get into any major taboos. And we are broadcasting from the United States, so, taboos may mean to you a different thing than it means to me. Anybody at the table can reserve the right to, at any point walk away and be like, I'm not comfortable with this. So, if things are getting just too extreme, just say so.
Okay.
Yeah. That said, don't tune in expecting to see anything anything that you might view in, say, snuff films, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're definitely not going Cannibal Holocaust levels of depraved here. Which that's a deep cultural cut if you're familiar, and if you're not, don't Google it. Trust me, don't Google that.
Oh, darn.
That is a deep cut.
We're talking like 50 years of film history going back. Yeah,
I was
something like
listening
that.
to a podcast that mentioned that. That's how I know what that is.
What is it?
Same.
By Michael Rosenbaum.
Yeah.
And
Definitely not anything that's going to land any of us in jail time. Although, I doubt any number of law enforcement people are going to be, searching through YouTube looking for people who are doing illegal stuff on the interwebs.
Oh, they do that all the time.
Or at least not at this level. I've got 11 subscribers. All right. I'm
Might
not
need to
terribly
ask
worried
them
about
if
it.
they're cops, because if they're cops and you ask
Brandon,
them-
Willow, are either of you cops?
Okay, because if they are, they have to tell us.
well, we've never
That's not a thing.
never seen Willow, so not in person.
She could be our local FBI man. Willow says yes. Up. We're toast, guys. It's over. Campaign's over. All right. Moving on. Variant rules. We're going to be. These are some rules that I propose that we use. If you would not like to play with these, speak now or forever hold your peace. Like I mentioned earlier, gritty realism. Primarily, short rests are going to take 8 hours.
Red Dead Redemption. Ride your horse for 3 hours.
Ride your horse for 3 hours, feed it apples to make it go plop plop. And long rests are going to take a week. This also means that you cannot expend hit dice unless somebody in the party has either an herbalism kit or a healer's kit, or makes a successful medicine check. And it's reasonable to assume that you might be able to find resources nearby, such as plant fibers or branches to be able to, say, set a broken bone. Similar things.
Will that mean injuries are permanent?
Some injuries will be permanent. We will be playing with a scar variant. So magical healing will not necessarily get you off scot-free from the scar department.
Okay.
And you'll see this crop up in a couple of NPCs because nudity. Whee!
So don't lose an eye.
And I, for one, consider the female nipple to be just as scandalous as the male nipple, which is not at all. So,
Woo!
That's fair.
don't at me in the comments because you can eat my ass. Don't do that. I don't like that. All right. Next up, we're going to go with the Mercer variant on spells, which is as the rules say, when you cast a spell as a bonus action, the only other spell that you can cast is a cantrip that has a casting time of 1 action. And there's been a lot of contention in the community over this, and I prefer the variant used by Matthew Mercer and popularized by Critical Role, which is the spell can be, as long as one of these spells is of using a slot of 2nd level or lower, you can cast 2 spells in a turn.
Neat.
So, if, say, you cast a fireball and then would like to throw out a Misty Step, you can do so, as long as the Misty Step is used in a 2nd level slot or lower. This places a little bit of a premium on 1st and 2nd level slots, but in my opinion, those slots need a little bit of love once you get to the higher levels anyway. Anybody have any beefs with that? Because all of the variant rules that apply to you will also apply to your enemies, so keep that in mind. Enemy spellcasters will fully also enjoy that benefit if you are enjoying that benefit.
Okay.
Yes, Brandon, but spell slots. That's why classes that are able to recover spell slots on a short rest have been long underrated. But if it takes you a week to get your spell slots back, maybe there's something to that short rest thing.
What did Brandon say?
Brandon said long rests take a week, but spell slots. Exactly.
Wow.
Yes, I believe that is Wesley.
It's Wesley.
It's Wesley.
Hello, Wesley.
Hey, I'm on my 15-minute break.
Okay.
15.
Yeah, I've got Wesley on Discord, which means that the viewers likely cannot hear him. So it sounds like right now we're just talking at ghosts.
We should have a picture of Wesley.
You're haunted, Wesley.
Life-size printout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're just going over the variant rules right now, as I'm sure you've heard.
Could have been one of those
Yeah,
doki
obviously,
doki
the
pillars.
connection inside is.
I can't remember what they're called.
Out in front of the store.
Duration?
I'm rather familiar with that.
Body
What?
pillows.
The Duration pillows? Put Wesley on one of those, the body pillows.
The Daki Macros?
That's it. I knew it was a D.
Jackie Macaron. That sounds like an alcoholic drink.
It does.
What?
Or
Anyway.
fish.
And I've already gotten Wesley's approval on most of these. All right, so next up on the list, potions as a bonus action. Under this variant, you will be able to use a potion as a bonus action instead of a main action because we're heroes, or would-be heroes. Nobody
Not
wants
quite
to spend their
heroes.
whole turn just
Common
taking a
folk.
shot, right? Like, I've seen people take a shot in less than a second. It's impressive. That said, you would still need to use an action to administer a potion to somebody else.
So basically,
Wesley, are you standing next to like a whale or a cow?
No, just a jackass with stock pipes.
I got you. And lastly, fumbles. Yes. Did you know fumbles are an optional rule in D&D? They're not the standard.
Fumble.
fumbles, like you drop your weapon.
Okay.
Yeah. If you roll a natural one, bad things happen to you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thought we were talking about football for a minute.
No. Fumbles are an optional rule that most people insist on because it's the most popular variant rule in the entire history of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
So normally, when you roll a natural one on, say, an attack roll or something similar, bad stuff happens to you, right? Like maybe you drop your weapon, or you stab yourself, or your tool breaks, etc., etc. You slip and break your ankle, etc.
You slip and break your neck.
Fumbles have been long utilized by GMs to make people fear of rolling their D20 approximately 5% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, normally a 2 is just as bad as a 1, but with the fumble rule, 1 is far worse than a 2.
I like how you cut your chicken like meatloaf.
Would you prefer I go the pelican route?
Yeah.
Anyway, that said, if you guys don't want to play with it, I understand. If you guys want to play with it for the lulz, I also understand. They can be pretty hilarious, and I tend to go a little bit lighter on them, particularly in combat. If it's good for a laugh, I might make it hilariously bad, but usually only if it's hilariously bad. Like, I'm talking moments that you'll talk about later in your life throughout the week, kind of things. Assuming that you talk to people in your life about D&D.
What?
Why don't we do fumbles and then extend the fumble range to anything below 5?
No.
No. Fumbles on that one.
It's already a 1 out of 20% chance, man.
All right.
Okay, easy go.
So, we're good with fumbles?
Yes.
Fumbles are on. Worth noting, normally when you're doing a skill check, a natural 1 does not necessarily mean an automatic failure, as you still have to add it up and see if you beat the DC, right?
But with a fumble, what does that make it?
With a fumble, there will probably still be success, albeit at some amount of consequence. For example, if you still manage to pick that lock because, it's an effortless lock, then, I don't know, your tool might get a little bit bent.
Oh.
Or maybe the lock drops on your foot and you yelp.
Could be very bad.
Which could be very bad.
Yeah.
You'd still succeed on the task in question, but with a consequence. Something similar like that. So I'll ask once more because that's an additional layer that you may not have thought about. Are we good with fumbles?
Sure.
Yes.
Because if you can fumble, your enemies can also fumble.
Yes.
And trust me, there are a lot more NPCs in the world that are rolling a lot more checks than you will ever be. So,
Oh,
fumbles
shit.
9 times out of 10 are more likely going to affect me more than they'll affect you.
Hmm.
Unless I'm using my patented GM dice, which are soaked with the blood of players,
Yeah.
and never roll ones.
Blood and tears.
That's not true. Decidedly not true.
Shut up, Wesley.
Shut up.
Telling lies.
No, Papa. Anyway,
Hey,
memes. Anyway, so the next thing that I'm going to be doing, which is rather unusual, is that people who have been in my campaigns before and or tuned into them, because I do have some number of views on some of the older videos on my channel. Surprise, surprise. They're mostly players just checking in and being like, okay, I'm gonna check my notes on this thing, which is one of the benefits of broadcasting your D&D campaigns, as Brandon in particular can tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're like me and unfavorited them all.
Yeah.
They were taking up too much space, man.
You can just subscribe.
I know. That's why I unfavorited it.
Anyway. So people who are familiar with my GMing career know that I tend to recycle a set number of NPCs. With a couple of exceptions, they're not usually hugely present in the plotline. With a couple of exceptions, I said.
I know.
One in particular that most of the people who have been in any of my campaigns are familiar with. Don, who is about sick of seeing this guy show up. But this time around, instead of going with the NPCs as how I want to run them, because I've run almost all of them in all of their forms as they appear, I'm going to ask the players a series of questions that are vague enough to give a hint if you are familiar with the character, but worded in such a way that it is not immediately obvious to the repercussions of your choice or benefits of said choice. So, without further ado, some really vague questions that may or may not impact the game in ways that you want it to. So, a magician lives in his brother's shadow. Has he taken guardianship of his nieces yet?
What?
There's no wrong answers, so if you're unsure as to why this will matter, oh, and this is an out-of-character question, so you as a player are answering these questions. It's not like some weird dream sequence, although I could have done it that way, and it would have been really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You've done a dream sequence before, though.
Yeah, I have, but not one that determines character aspects like this.
Oh. So are we all supposed to answer?
Yeah,
And you'll
I'm
just
going to
take
need an
majority?
answer. No, I'm actually going to record what each of you say. In the event of a tie, I'll go with the more interesting one. And that is the more interesting one, in my opinion, because I'm the GM.
Could you repeat it?
Sure. A magician lives in his brother's shadow. Has he taken guardianship of his nieces yet? This one is a fairly straightforward yes or no. Some of the other ones have a wider variance of answer.
Because if he was, then he wouldn't be living in his brother's shadow. Like, if his brother is more great than him, then why would they need another guardian?
I'm not going to answer that, but
I say yes.
okay. Yes, Brandon, you are correct. You know who I'm talking about. You said yes?
I know who you're talking about, too.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
But I'll say yes.
What's your answer? Yes? Okay. All right. Next question. All right. A woman of faith suffers under her captor. Does she exact revenge?
I know who you're talking about there, too.
Do you? Because that description could fit a number of characters that I've written.
Well, I know one.
Yeah.
No.
Don? Taylor?
Yes.
I guess I would have to know the factors.
That's part of the fun. You don't get to know that.
That's not fair, though. Is she human?
I can't tell you that.
Okay. Can I say yes and no?
What do you mean?
Yes under certain circumstances, but no under other circumstances.
No.
Why not?
Simple yes or no. It's got to be able to be recorded on my sheet of graph paper right here. So like nothing crazy elaborate.
Oh. No, because revenge always comes back. You know, to get that person.
Alrighty.
Never ending cycle.
Next one. A noble knight shows great promise. Is her father her confidant?
What do you mean confidant?
Who does she go to for advice in her life?
Okay.
Like, is her father the closest, the most prominent parental figure in her life? And this again is yes or no.
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 I would say it depends on the mom, but sure.
Yes.
Yeah. She could have had a bad mom.
Or a dead mom.
Or a dead mom. And that's the person that knows her the best.
Alrighty. Next one. A man is one with wolves. How old is he?
No. Fuck him. 100, he's dead. There you go.
Alright, so Don says an elder. Like, I'm not looking necessarily for a number, like, just like a descriptor of age.
You said
Like-
how old is he?
Yes. Like, is he young? Is he old? Middle-aged?
He's ancient.
So Don goes with elder.
Is that the oldest they can get?
Yes. Interestingly, there is one version of this character that has not yet showed up in any of my campaigns to boot.
He is a youngling.
A child.
Child?
Yeah.
All right.
Mhm. A youngling.
That's one of the exceptions, by the way, as to people who may or may not have relevance to the plot. None of these characters, by and large, are going to have too much sway over the plot of this campaign, but they have in previous campaigns.
Yeah.
A band of mercenaries charges exorbitant prices. Has their leader retired?
I don't understand business.
What do you
I don't.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Gotta get that money.
A prophesied priest doubts his future. Has he slain his sister?
Yes.
Mm.
I think I might know who that one is, actually.
Question.
Repeat it for me, please.
A prophesied priest doubts his future. Has he slain his sister?
Yes.
I should probably check in with chat, see if they're wigging out about these. Like, oh, not really.
Yes.
And what did you say, Taylor?
Yes.
3 yeses.
Would you believe that is the first one that everybody has been unanimous on?
Is it?
That's the only one that all of you have given the same answer for.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought.
Wesley, the previous one, Wesley gave a different answer
Oh, because
because I asked Wesley ahead of time. All right.
Of course.
A family of artificers begins to influence politics. Has the patriarch passed on his mantle?
The family of who?
Artificers.
No.
What are artificers?
People who create magic items.
With their fists.
No, then they'd be artificers.
That's what I said, artificers.
That'd be a no.
And said no too.
The last two you guys were unanimous on. How about that? All right.
Wait, did you say no?
I said,
For the artificers?
has their patriarch passed on the mantle?
Correct.
I said no.
Yeah, you all said no.
Oh, okay.
All right. So that is it for that. Does anybody have any questions about that segment?
Well,
You mean besides the what the hell was that, JD?
That's
Uh-huh.
pretty much my only question, but
All right. Since you've not played in one of my campaigns, you're not familiar with any of these characters. But Taylor has been in a couple of them, and Don has been in most of my campaigns. So who do you think the magician with his in his brother's shadow is?
the M guy, the halfling. What's his name? What is his name?
They are both halflings. I'll give
They're
you that.
wizards.
Yeah, they're both wizards.
I
They're
can't
both
remember
halflings.
his name.
Well, the one that you're familiar with, he has a different surname because they're cousins.
Oh. So it's not them?
No, it is.
Oh.
Does Brandon know?
Brandon actually correctly guessed. He asked in the chat, didn't Chris's character have sexy relations with one of those nieces? Yes.
He
Yes,
did?
he did. Well, no, he almost did. But it was he was real proud of the moves that he was putting on this chick, and he was like, "Wait a second, you're an elf. How old are you?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm 80 years old." And then he sat there, stared at me, and said, "Hey, JD, I've got a player question for you." And I was like, "Yes, Chris." And he said, "How? When do elves mature physically?" And I said, "Oh, about 110." And he was like, "All right, I'm out."
that's a hard right turn.
It's like, "Oh no!"
I mean, back then it wasn't really frowned upon, so.
Gritty
and-
realism,
And
am I
and
right?
technically, elves mature at a physical rate roughly half as quickly as humans do, but it's the mental maturity and cultural thing that is referenced in the maturity columns in books gone by. There's no official material for 5th edition, I don't think, that states maturity rates, that sort of thing.
So 80 years old, she's like a teenager.
Yeah, more or less. It's
Mid-
not necessarily
teenager?
like it's not super gross, but it would be frowned upon. But we are dealing with somewhat medieval expectations here, which if players are uncomfortable with that, fine, sure. There are some people.
I've watched Game of Thrones. I'm fine.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm ready.
I've read Game of Thrones. Those kids are younger in that book, in the books than the.
Taylor over here. I'll do a 13-year-old. You don't know me. Bring on the teenagers.
Yeah.
I mean, Sansa is about that in the books.
Thank you, George R.R. Martin, for making pedophilia okay again. All right. So, anybody have a guess on a woman of faith suffering under her captor.
I don't remember her name.
Nope.
Okay.
It's a tiefling, isn't it?
It is a tiefling.
Yeah, I don't remember her name though, but I know who it is.
Well, tieflings being my favorite race, that could apply to a lot of people. Tieflings and paladins being one of my favorite classes could
Oh,
apply to a lot
I
of people.
definitely know who it is.
Yeah.
And what is her name? Something that kind of rhymed. It sort of rhymed. I remember it kind of because it was da da da, and it,
The super descriptive.
I know. Shit.
What about a noble knight who shows great promise? I don't think you were in that one. Either of those ones where that character appeared.
That's Stradius.
It is not.
I
I
think.
don't know.
All right. Well, I know that Don already knows who this one is, but a man who is one with wolves.
Ricard.
I was thinking of the banter guy, but
Oh, he's not. He's a.
He's a Rakshasa, tiger demon.
Hmm.
But they were in that campaign that you were in.
yeah, like one killed the other. Banter
Wasn't her name Nadia
killed.
or something like that?
Nemia.
Nemia. That's it.
Yep.
Anemia.
Uh,
And I forgot her last name.
let's see. The band of mercenaries who charge exorbitant prices.
That's the group Felicity was with. What are their names?
The Sellsword Lords.
That's it.
Yeah, they were also in that campaign too.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah, you
That's
were.
the one I was
That's-
with James in.
That's the one. Things got weird in that campaign. All right. A prophesied priest who doubts his future.
That's Stradius.
Do you think so?
Wasn't he a priest?
He is a cleric. I wouldn't call him a priest.
He was priest-like.
He had access to cleric spells.
I mean, yeah.
Priestley. I don't know.
Why? Was there another guy that was like that? You talking about the Pope guy? What's his fucking name?
If you get one part of his name,
Sano? Sano Sane?
So no more.
that's the one.
Okay. What was this question again?
Has he slain his sister?
Oh. Oops. When we did that question, I thought we were talking about Stradius. Whoops.
In fairness, I actually have not run a campaign with Sano in it yet where he has yet to kill his sister. Fun fact. For as
Hey.
many times as he showed up in my campaigns, and he showed up a fair amount,
Yeah.
he's always been past that hump and of a mentor-like status where he's like, look, guys, shit gets real hard. Comes at you fast. Right? But, you got to keep on keeping on. That's what makes people heroes. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to be afraid. Those are normal. That happens. Don't
Are
beat
you-
yourself up for it.
are you-
Now,
Are
get
you
out
talking
there.
about like just got done killing his sister?
Not necessarily. Because he went into exile after he killed his sister. He was like, how could I have done that? I'm such a terrible person. No, he has an existential crisis after that, which is why he's never featured in a campaign right after the fact, because you guys would never find it. He's at his house crying all day. That's all he did after that.
So sad.
It's really sad.
Very sad.
It's probably one of the most emotional arcs that I've written for a character. Like, in terms of just deep depression. Yeah. And the family of artificers. Now, this is has this family has been a consistent favorite of players, regardless of the campaign. Like every time these people show
the
up,
Arbrock family or
uh,
whatever, with Hector and what's his face?
Nope.
Nope.
it is not.
No. They're not elves, are they?
They are not. They tend to be dwarves.
Oh, Armos?
Mm-hmm.
Ah. Yeah. Armos is pretty alright. I remember the first time he did his voice. You said it killed you.
Yep. That was before I'd looked into any sort of vocal training. And just tore up my throat doing Armos's voice. Because I did a very deep, very, very scratchy, kind of Scottish, very heavy. And I do it differently these days because I don't want to tear up my throat again. Because I actually had a sore throat for like 2 days after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's pretty bad.
It's called overdoing it, kids. Don't do it. There's a reason why some GMs choose not to choose very specifically.
Nothing wrong with the Scottish accent.
Just reading the chat.
It's just deep. What?
I'm a big fan of Uncle Scrooge.
In response to the Taylor and teenager stuff, Brandon says Taylor is just like, show me a sister I can diddle.
And then
Talking
this video
about,
got flagged.
Yeah, talking about the I can only assume in response to the knight and her mentor, Brandon says, "Come on, Dawn, I know that knight. You've been in 2 campaigns with that character." She took kind of a minor role in the second one where she appeared, though.
Which 2?
It was, I think it was Road to Fame, the one with the vampire apocalypse, and the one I did for Sue and her internet friends.
Apocalypse.
Of note, we have seen both versions of that character. Both when her father is her mentor and when he is not. Vastly different character arcs, I will tell you that. But in both versions, her mom's dead. Because death via childbirth was a thing that happened back in the day, guys.
Because this is a Disney movie.
I think I do know who you're talking about. I just
Yeah,
don't remember
It's
the
certainly
name.
possible.
Shit. It was a male name, wasn't it?
Yeah. If you want, Brandon, I can recount the story of the vampire apocalypse for Willow.
It's pretty bad. Damn.
All right. But yes, Brandon, you San Osane is my my first OC. Do not steal. Cleric of Pelor because I'm original. Anyway, but the vampire apocalypse. So this harkens back to 2015? I think I was running that campaign. It was a while ago.
Mhm.
So
2015?
I think so. Another one. I know which campaign it is. I don't remember what year because once you graduate college, time ceases to mean anything, and you just get lost in a vortex of that was last year. Holy shit! I thought that was last week.
I guess that was the first campaign after college.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Anyway, so the players recruited a vampire NPC because we were playing without the Actually, it more, I think, has to do with being Mike's fault instead of Chris. Chris, I gotta say, was probably pretty innocent for that one.
Oh
But,
shit! I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, you do. So there was a vampire
Oh.
NPC that had protected the players from trolls in a swamp, right? And because we were playing without the monstrous races assumption, that meant that undead were not necessarily evil, right? So this vampire took them in and was like, "You guys can sleep here, and I'll make sure that the trolls don't chase after you into here, although they usually don't attack the church because they know that I stay here." And it was this old dilapidated church building that had slowly begun sinking into the swamp, right? Now, the thing was, because the swamp was next to a river, there were some portions of it that had moving water, which prevented the vampire from escaping,
Yes.
which was by her own design. She wanted to imprison herself somewhere that she could not feast on other people, as per her instinct. So the party decides that because they fell so in love with this character, that they're going to outfit their wagon so that they can go back and rescue her from the swamp. Because a vampire can traverse over moving water if they are dormant in their coffin. Gets around the normal vampire rules. So they do this. And over the course of their adventure, I continue to update them on her status. She does chase off things in the night, some rather harmful things. But eventually she runs out of arrows for her bow. And she tells the party, "Hey, next time you guys are doing some shopping, could you guys pick me up a quiver of arrows? I seem to have run out." And the party was like, "Yeah, sure, we'll pick you up some arrows." And then they never did. Ever. Just not at all.
Really?
Yeah, you guys consistently forgot about it. Anyway, so I had, unbeknownst to the players, outfitted her with an affliction called Blood Frenzy. She was able to keep her marbles in her brain for as long as she did not smell blood. So it was very important that she continued to use just her fists in combat and not a slashing weapon. Because the moment she smelled blood, she would fly into a berserker frenzy and attack the nearest thing until she had been sated. And that would include fully draining 30 points of constitution. Now, this was 3.5 back when constitution damage was basically the end of a character. If you didn't get that fixed pronto, it meant that your hit points would fall by an amount equal to your level as if you did not have those modifier points in constitution. So, the party goes to this fancy ball being thrown by the main villain of the campaign. It was a political intrigue campaign, and the guy was a crazed king who was attempting to militaristically take over the rest of the continent. So the party decides that they are going to go and get some useful information about the king's powers by wandering right into his front door and being like, "Hey, we're the pieces of shit trying to dethrone you. Have at us," right? Now, admittedly, they knew that the king would not act rashly in front of his subjects because he was still trying to present this front of, "I'm a rational human being who doesn't just haul off and kill people," right? So this played to their advantage. What they did not anticipate was Brandon was playing a bard by the name of Lily. And what happened was, when they wandered into the ball first, the king was like, "You are very clearly the leader. You have the highest charisma." So he tried to charm the bard. Bards are good at will saves. And so instead of being charmed and spilling all of the party's secrets immediately to their greatest enemy, Brandon was like, "I just shrug it off and pay no mind to it." Then, as the party was leaving the ball, Brandon wanders up to the king and has his character say to the king, "You really should lead conversations by not charming people." So the king, who had made a pact with several demons, decided that he was going to flaunt some of this power and teleported the party across the continent. Now, most of the party ended up with at least some members of the other party. The druid had rolled poorly and ended up by himself way the fuck over there in bumfuck nowhere. He landed in a swamp town that was known for being infested by spiders pretty regularly. But fortunately, being a druid, he's not too perturbed by this. So, the other part, half of the party ended up in a safe place on the northern side of the continent, in one of the halls of the palace of an ally of theirs. One of the people who had suggested, hey, you might consider doing some espionage to figure out what we're up against here, right? So that was fortuitous. What was not fortuitous was that the party rogue, monk, and the vampire ended up in a desert on the southern end of the continent, near a military fortress that was controlled by the Mad King, and who were under explicit orders to not let anybody pass unless they paid a toll. So when there's a flash of light in the dead of night next to your fortress, you're like, we should probably check that out. Because, sand is not known for just flashing in the middle of the night. Not generally.
Unless it's hit by lightning.
Yeah, so these guards wander out to go and look into this, and they're on camels, so the monk, vampire, and rogue cannot outpace them. Mind you, this is back in 3.5, before rogues got all this fancy movement additional stuff. The monk could outrun them, but hefting the rogue and or vampire on his back would be detrimental and would slow him down, and then he's dealing with levels of exhaustion before he has to face off with the guards, right? So they decide, we're gonna see what these people have to say. So when the guards are pretty steadfast in that they're going to arrest all of these people until they can figure out what to do with them, the monk, for once in his goddamn life, decides that he's going to do the chaotic thing instead of be a law-abiding citizen, and proceeds to start a brawl. 3 versus 10. However, they are stock guards and are not too difficult to take out. However, in order to get sneak attack in 3.5, a rogue must be flanking with an ally who is threatening an enemy in melee, or fulfill another absurd set of circumstances, which 9 times out of 10 never happened. So, since the monk was doing just fine on his own, the rogue decided to use her piercing weapon on an enemy that the vampire was flanking, thus setting off the blood frenzy. And so then the vampire proceeded to eat a whole bunch of guards. And when all of the guards were taken out, the monk and the rogue were like, all right, we're going to book it. And the vampire, coming off of her blood frenzy, was like, yeah, let's run. Well, because the monk had dealt non-lethal damage to the guards, that meant that after an hour had passed, some of them woke up and were like, oh man, we got to get all these people back to the fort. So instead of leaving the bodies that had been drained by a vampire and had 2 days to turn into a vampire, yeah, more or less. So the guards go back to their fortress, and because they've got to wait for an envoy to take the blood-drained guards back to their families in the capital city, they decide to preserve the bodies out in the open, right, in one of the basements. Well, turns out preserving a corpse that is going to become a vampire doesn't do anything to the status of vampirism. So 2 vampires rise up from the basement of this military complex and proceed to turn everybody in that fortress into a vampire. So,
Yep.
yeah, then you had a fortress full of vampires. Now, I know what you're thinking. A fortress full of vampires in the middle of a desert? That sounds like shooting fish in a barrel, JD. Oh, but vampires are intelligent undead. And they knew what their bodies knew before death. And that meant that they were going to wait until the envoy arrived with the covered wagon that it always came with to a desert. because you don't travel through a desert without some amount of cover, be it either body wraps to keep yourself from baking in the sun, or, a covered wagon, enchanted to have the wheels roll over sand, because magic. So then the vampires had access to a covered wagon. From that point, all it took was one person who knew how to work with wood to turn some of the crates in the basement into coffins, and then they were able to travel across the desert to an adjacent town. And then, as the vampires had turned the military base that they were in into a smorgasbord, they proceeded to turn an entire town into a smorgasbord. Then, having the resources of a town under their sway, proceeded to spread across that entire bottom part of the continent. Fortunately, that part of the continent was locked on either side by rivers, so that the vampires couldn't just escape to the rest of the continent. Unfortunately, there was a cult of undead worshippers and Vecna on the continent somewhere else. So the players then had a time limit to get rid of all of the vampires before the cult was like, hey, you know what? Let's teleport those undead other places. Should be good for a laugh. The players cut it real close. As I recall, they had about 2 days to spare before they finished off the last of the vampires. And that's how one person's decision to not be a law-abiding monk and let the halfling, who has rolled a 36 on her sleight of hand to conceal a set of lockpicks in her hair. The monk decided, you know what? We're going to resist arrest instead of getting arrested and then just breaking out because we have a rogue with us.
Who was the rogue?
Leah.
Oh, yeah.
She took the young template and halfling race so that she had a -4 to strength, but a +6 to dex. Yeah. And that is how one man, Mike, if you're
Oh,
listening,
yeah, he was a monk.
that is how your decision to resist arrest derailed my entire campaign.
And he made it into JD's Hall of Fame.
For the second time.
For the second time.
The first time was another story for another time that I might tell on another thing. But we're more or less done with session 0, which is why I got into that whole story.
How was that really it?
Yeah, more or less. I covered everything that I want.
I didn't even need my sheet.
In case you wanted to go over anything. Anyway. Garrett, for experience points, put 0 out of 4 because you've spent all 4 points that you had. This just helps us keep track of what your power level is at. Also keep track of what you've spent points on.
What's this guy ever say about his power level? It's 4.
Anyway, so yeah, that's more or less all we've got for session 0. So Brandon says relative to the vampire apocalypse and the guards showing up, don't even paint it with a nice picture. They had a conversation and said they didn't have time for the semantics of the guards and gave the okay to kill the guards.
Oh my gosh. Not even an attempt. Just
Yeah. I tend to look at things with rose-colored glasses because I like fond memories. But in some cases, things are a little bit more ugly than I recall.
Well, you have to make yourself happy somehow. You sad little man.
question. Is our starting proficiency bonus +1 or is it 0?
2.
2. Good to know.
You're peasants, but you're pretty good at farming.
Passive wisdom.
Passive perception check. That is whatever your perception bonus is.
Sorry.
Are you proficient in perception? You are as an elf. Your wisdom is +0, so your perception bonus is +2. So your passive perception is 12. He's an Eladrin,
Excuse me.
which is a subrace for elf. It's basically an elf that spent too much time in the Feywild.
Oh. You're a crazy elf.
I am.
There's a couple of skills. I'm curious as to what modifier goes with them. Insight uses wisdom, correct?
Oh yeah, I printed out the funky version of the sheets. You know what? We have a player's handbook right here.
Ah.
I will find you the page because I've turned to it many a time.
Is Brandon still watching?
Brandon is still watching. That was Wesley leaving the Discord channel.
Brandon, I love you. Come back to me.
Oh. I miss seeing Brandon's wonderful face
There you
too.
go. Brandon says, "Hey, Tay-Bay."
Oh.
This conversation is recorded and will be on YouTube forever and ever.
Until it gets taken down by YouTube for inappropriate content.
And until the apocalypse
That's
comes
true.
upon us.
I underestimated how big this cup was. It's huge. You want some milk?
No, I'm good.
But I heard about that movie from a podcast called Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum.
I heard it from Profiles in Eccentricity.
I didn't hear about
think it's
this
cold.
this podcast till a few weeks
Too
ago.
cold.
Really cold.
I told you.
And I've been catching up with it.
So, does anybody here or in chat have any questions about really anything?
It's only 7:20.
when we
Tonight
start,
was supposed to be a short session.
when we
Only planned on it taking about 2 hours. Go ahead.
when we start,
Which is next week. Oh, that's the other thing that we needed to go over. Okay, so when do we want to meet? Because I'm good with Sundays, and everybody seems to be good with Sundays.
Yeah,
But
I'm
what
good.
is
I'm
the-
actually good with Sundays still.
Wesley mentioned that the most optimal day to meet for him would be Wednesday. And I told him that Don had expressed some doubt about Wednesday already, but that I would float it anyway.
Either
I
be down.
I don't like coming up here weekdays because of the traffic.
Tends to be bad.
Fair enough.
Sunday is a lot easier.
Yeah.
Sunday's more consistent for me.
Okay.
Because
Couldn't
if
you
I
just
do
ask
have to
Scott
work on Sunday,
on
it's almost
Sundays?
always in the
Yeah.
morning. So.
It's just he was already planning on making Wednesday a day off from work because he has classes coming up on Wednesdays.
Could he have 2 days off?
Yeah, and he said Sunday will still be good for him. It's just he was setting it into his work schedule. I need Wednesdays off. So,
He could work in the mornings like I do.
yeah, I think he already does that, is the thing. But, you know, I thought I'd float it anyway.
Today is pretty inconsistent for him though, because he usually does not have to work closing on Sundays. Like,
Yeah,
it's very
today-
rare.
Yeah, today was just kind of an odd one out because he's made it to all of the other crawls that I did for Tales from the Yawning Portal.
Yeah.
Like with pretty good consistency. I think he missed like one, and that was a 3 or 4 month stint that I was doing those.
Yeah.
So,
We're starting out as peasants. What jobs will we be doing?
that's up to you.
Oh, that
Reed,
doesn't
the
matter.
GM doesn't give a shit.
Okay.
So
Something.
Anything.
in terms of, I understand we are dirt farmers. We
You could
farm
become a
we
whore.
farm the dirt. We make it grow
Shake your
things
titties.
hopefully so that we don't starve to death. But beyond that, I had a question about equipment. So like we're given a certain number of weapon proficiencies and stuff like that. Can we assume that we have said weapon? Would it be a more primitive version of it?
I actually covered that the night that we were talking, the night that everybody else rolled out. So there will be some number of weaponry around town. Most of it is confined to what is considered the town's armory, although that is a bad name for it because it is a shack that one guy maintains.
Okay.
Midtown
And also, that guy is
The dick.
that guy's name is Richard the Dick Frumageth.
Hmm.
He is 68 years old, so that should tell you how well these weapons are maintained.
He a
Okay.
human.
It's important for my character's livelihood for him to have weapons. So
Yes, there are people who would be able to help you make a bow. Brandon Hellhot would know how to string a bow and whatnot. But Samuel Dinley likely would have procured a proper bow for you. And you would have had to work off that debt. But you, as of this point in the game, unless you choose to be, you are considered absolved of any debts that you have.
okay. Can I assume I have basically weapons that I'm proficient in, which for me would be spear, bow.
You have to
Yeah.
spend proficiency points on those.
Okay.
Because as stated in the document, you get 2 simple weapon proficiencies for free.
Yes. And it's a short bow, is what I meant to say. That's a simple weapon. And then the spear.
Yep.
So basically I was thinking, like, is it like a proper spear with like a metal head with it and everything, or is it like a wooden spear that I've fashioned myself for hunting purposes?
Likely fashioned yourself. There is one spear that has a metal head. It is property of the town guard, or the village guard, I should say. But yeah. We've got a lovely little list of village NPCs.
Yes, I saw you added the races and stuff, which has a little bit of interest. A half dwarf, never played in a campaign or thing with half dwarves. What, like,
It stands to reason. It's got to happen, right?
I mean,
Like,
I've
and
thought about it, but
somebody-
what do they look like?
Basically like
Half
humans,
dwarf,
but
half
with
human?
Well,
with like
fair. I was asking for that.
more knobby, angular features. Like their nose is a little bit larger, jaw a little bit more blocky. A little bit in terms of proportion, their arms are a little bit longer, legs are a little bit shorter. Because in most depictions, dwarves have kind of longer arms, which has been described as gorilla-esque.
I didn't
but,
realize that before.
Yeah,
what?
me neither.
I didn't realize that before.
Well, I mean, in movies, they're not depicted that way, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got to find an actor who's like just fits the bill, kind of, and
Yeah.
then they spend half the movie on their knees just going,
Gimli.
"Nobody tosses a dwarf." Anyway,
dangerous of a shot.
but yeah, like if you look at like source material for the D&D books, they tend to have hands that go down to or past their knees in most depictions.
Jeez.
Most 3D character models are the worst offenders of this, where their hands, in some cases, will almost reach their ankles. It's like
knuckle draggers for real.
yeah, actual knuckle draggers. But that's of particular note. The first Neverwinter Nights game was guilty of that one, where like it's mid-calf level of arm length. Yeah, and just like this was back in like 2000, right? So
Yeah.
the graphics are not good; they're bad. Cutting edge for the time, but just not good at all. But yeah, so I tend to ascribe to that model of what a dwarf tends to look like. It's just a little bit short, squat, thick, blocky features with slightly elongated arms and proportionally shorter legs.
So does that mean?
So a half dwarf will be shorter in stature. For example, so where Earl Hellhod is a human, he's fairly statuesque. He's got 5'11", average build, that sort of thing. His son Brandon Hellhod is shorter. He's about 5'7". He has a much kind of wider frame to work with. His fingertips actually come to his knees, which on a human you're looking at like between the knees and the hips somewhere for where your fingertips land.
Yeah.
Depending on your proportions, right? And everybody is different. So, and he's got a very pronounced nose. It's very Roman kind of nose.
Okay. So is it?
Not quite Cyrano, but you know.
And I know there's like kind of, I guess you could say like a spectrum, like some, like in half elves or half orcs, you know, traditionally would be like some tend to look more orcish and some like barely show any signs of them.
Yeah,
Would a
and,
half
and
dwarf
it's
be
one of
someone
those
you could?
spectrums. It's actually that actually is a similar line of thought used for the Trud family. So you've got Judd, who is human, and you've got Valerie, who is a half elf, right? Well, their first son takes
Corn
after
butt.
more
Oh yeah.
human
Requested to
features.
be
So
my friend.
I've described him as
I
a
got one
human
of those the other day.
versus
That's the same chick.
Not the same thing.
Vanessa, who it shows more half elf and elven features. So she's been described as a half elf, and it's one of those games of genetics, you know, where whatever is dominant, whatever is dormant, it changes between kids. So even if you've got the same parents with the same combination of genes, you're going to get a different output every time.
So half elves, half orcs, half dwarves. So are halflings known as quarterlings?
You're not the first person I've heard make that joke.
Okay.
I sincerely hope you will be the last. Every time that joke is made in front of me, I'm like, please let this be the last time I have to endure this goddamn joke.
Never.
It never stops.
Never. It never stops.
Don't
No.
stop.
But I
That
have
said,
thought as to what a
halflings,
would be like.
Yeah, no. Leave it to the depravity of humans to be like, you know what? I wonder what it would be like if I stuck my dick in this, right? Because that's basically how all the trouble starts. No matter where you go in a story, at some point the trouble began when somebody was like, I'm gonna stick my dick in it.
Yeah.
Like I'm a proponent of the idea that
Are we
that
still on air?
we are still on air. We're at an hour and a half.
No, we're on the ground.
We're on air, and we wish we weren't. They definitely exist somewhere. They basically, I'm unsure as to what they look like because, like most depictions of a halfling are basically just it's a human but with a larger head.
Yeah.
And they're small. That sort of thing.
You don't
I thought
consider
that was the
them
one that I had.
hobbits, but without the
That's such a weird
TM
name.
restriction. Because
Right,
some people
yeah.
basically treat them like that.
Yeah,
Which,
more-
to be
Yeah.
fair, hobbits
Oh.
are basically short
Yeah.
humans with
Well then,
hairy feet.
really larger feet,
First
hairy
hero
feet.
face.
Yeah,
Larger.
large and hairy,
just
like me. Anyway,
You are not large.
I am very hairy though.
You are very hard.
Anyway, but yes, halflings have to exist because that's just a thing. Half versions of races that don't exist because of the way that their lore is set up. Half Dragonborn do not exist because Dragonborn. You know what? I actually forget which set of lore that 5th edition is going with because they've gone through like 4 or 5 different lore changes since 3rd edition, and I'm getting real fucking tired of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Like at one point, it was they are their own race. At another point, it was they are humans or another race that underwent a special ritual to transform them. Another one is like, yeah, they just sometimes hatch out of dragon eggs sometimes because fuck, why not?
what?
Yes, that was an actual bit of lore once for Dragonborn.
That is so bizarre.
They're like some sort of rare birth defect where the dragon just comes out humanoid shaped.
That's like wrong on a couple of different
On
levels.
so many levels.
Yeah.
So I don't know which one it is, but to just make things easy, there are no half Dragonborn. All right, I don't care what version of the lore we go with. Let's just get that out of your mind right at the get-go. And I like Dragonborn. They're a good race flavor-wise. I feel like mechanic-wise, they could do with a little bit of a buff because they're kind of underwhelming this edition. But that said, they were absolutely just balls to the wall busted back in 3rd.
Now, I'm going to test you. What would a half turtle look like?
Turtles are those that new race that just
The
got
little,
introduced. Yeah,
they're the short little
turtle
tur-
people.
Yeah, turtle people.
Um,
Do they have a wart on their back?
at some point, some amount of genetic mixing just does not happen. It goes into the crossbreeding thing, and I do know and have supported many times that the that technically speaking, by the way that most people perceive it, the human half-elf thing technically falls into subspecies reproducing with each other. So it is not horse and donkey. It is, say, draft horse and race horse,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
To draw a horse analogy. I don't know why I went to horses, but there it is. Right. They're clearly different subspecies, right?
Yeah.
One does not look like the other. If you've ever seen
I
a
have no
draft
idea.
horse, that's a fucking draft horse.
This is over my head.
Like there's no mixing up like your average horse with a draft horse. Like the differences are just clear as day.
Yeah.
But it's not horse and donkey, because although they can reproduce, their offspring are sterile, right? And that would have lots of implications. Half elves would be a sterile race, which would actually explain their scarcity, according to the lore book. Because when you roll up to a 5th edition campaign, you're like, all right, who didn't pick half elf? And one person raises their hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a Tolkien.
I mean,
thing,
they're
right?
good, but
Yeah. So.
anyway, but yeah. So
Just very important stuff. I have to get
right.
through.
And then the other race that I'm putting my foot down right here and now. There are no halves of is tieflings, because there's very specific reasons for why that is set up in the player's handbook itself and elaborated on in Mordenkainen's. They are cursed. You either are a tiefling or you are not. If your spouse is not a tiefling, this is pretty much a 50-50 on whether or not they're coming out tiefling.
So, okay, interesting question then. Are tieflings always corrupted humans? Or are there tieflings that can exist out of corruption of other races as well?
It stands to reason. But that said, the tiefling race, as it is presented in the player's handbook, they have their own set of racial features. So whatever they were before, it hardly makes a difference.
Yeah. And you don't look at it as being a transformation, but that they're their own race? At some point, there might have been a big...
Way
to-do
back
about it?
at the beginning of history, there were no tieflings. There was a town that made some very poor life decisions, and then that city was transformed wholesale into tieflings, and that is where tieflings began. Since then, they have been their own race. Whatever they were before doesn't matter now.
Oh, and what the heck is with that? There's an Asimar?
Asimar. Yeah, okay. So as to that boy specifically, I'm not going to really get into that. You can... But the Asimar have been are kind of on a similar wavelength of tiefling. It's just that with an Asimar, they crop up like once in every 10 generations or so.
Okay.
But that's because with the Asimar, they trace their bloodline way back to a celestial ancestor. And one of the examples of how this occurs in the books is that it's kind of like a prophecy thing. Like deity commands one of their agents to go down and boink that human, and then later on, the divine blood passes through the generations until it is just dominant in
The seventh son of the seventh son.
Yes, to
kind of
quote a
thing.
bad movie that I really enjoyed and thought would do better as a series instead of a movie.
Yes.
I actually tried to turn that into a stage joke. How do you think people go about, like courting in that universe? Because it's got to be the seventh son of a seventh son, right? How many siblings do you have? 6 brothers. Okay.
Never.
I think we're just going to call it here.
Never watched that movie.
It has a lot of lore and it's very crunchy because, every 10 minutes or so, they're like, okay, so here's this thing that we need to explain about this universe real quick to a person who lives in this universe, but for some reason doesn't understand all of this stuff.
Okay.
It's one of
Yeah,
those,
yeah.
which it's got Jeff Bridges in it. Dear God, do I love that man. I will see most anything if it's got Jeff Bridges' name on it because I just enjoy him as an actor. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. People do the same for like Tom Cruise movies. But anyway, Don doesn't remember watching that movie.
What movie?
Seventh
Seventh
Son.
Son.
Nope.
Yep, there we go. Anyway, she was definitely there. I remember watching it with her. She just doesn't remember it. Don does this thing where she purges from her memory things that she.
Oh,
doesn't
that's an
want to remember.
amazing talent.
That is.
Holy cow!
I wish I could do that.
She doesn't do it on purpose.
don't.
It's just for things that don't matter to her. She's like, I'm never going to use this knowledge ever again.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Because surely the only thing I can remember when I need to remember something is some obtuse piece of information that decided to crop up.
Yeah.
So one thing that I always like to know, I'm playing human. It would be more closely relevant to my character if I was playing something like, I don't know, half orc or whatever. In Caliph, and I guess
By the way,
this is-
there's a lot of redhead players in this.
I've
campaign.
just
there's 3 of
realized
them.
that there's
Yeah.
3 redheads at the table, and it's like,
So this will be the luckiest campaign in all of
Me
history.
and you are the only ones.
Yeah, but my mother's a redhead, and I've got some red hairs in there. They're just mixed in with all the brown and black and like.
Nobody in my family
And
is
your
a
sister-in-law.
Yeah, weird how that works, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, you were saying one thing that you you like to know at the outset.
I would like to know about. Okay, so it's a human dominant society, I
Yes.
assume. What are prevalent attitudes as to the other races? Are half orcs and
Fantasy
such?
racism.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So that that depends on regionality mostly. With like I explained before in our chats, and I'll say it on cam so that there's some amount of posterity.
Mhm.
I think is the word I want. The farther north you travel, the more technologically advanced you'll get. The
Okay.
farther south you travel, the more mysticism you get.
What
By
about West? Oh,
Uh,
you're talking about in-game. I'm
yes,
sorry.
in-game.
I thought you were talking about real life.
well, yes, but
It just blew my mind. for
funny
a
how that
second.
works, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, Dawn just comes out of left field with those observations where she thinks we're talking about something else, and she's like, "Yeah, that makes sense," and we're just like, "No, that actually." Anyway,
Blew my mind.
yeah, but no, yeah, and so it stands. The more north you go, the less, the more homogenized the races will become. They'll still observe their own traditions, but by and large, they're working as part of a greater kind of societal thing. Whereas the more south you get, you'll see there's a lot more tendency to ascribe value based on identity and presentation.
Mhm.
So by that same logistic, because people tend to assign that value like that, you'll get people splitting off into cliques of people who are like that. So you get a lot of tribalism the further south you travel. So you'll get more roving bands of orcs who are raiders because, that is just what orcs do. It's a
Yeah.
cultural hallmark of their race that they just do that. But if you were to go to the northern capital, way at the tip of the northern side of the continent, you'll find orcs and humans performing the same duties at the same level of pay, at the same level of respect. as if they were literally the same.
Caliph is fair. It's south of center. It's not all the way south, but it's
Yeah, it's not all the way south. You are on the southern end of the continent.
Mhm.
I plan to be doing 4 map sections of this continent.
okay.
1 for each tip, and then 2 in the middle on each
Just the
side
tip?
of the border.
I was trying for somebody to say that.
Yeah, so that's my plans for the maps thus far. But also because of that homogenization, you'll see a lot more interbreeding up in the north. So where in the southern kingdom, you'll get a lot of very strict breakdowns of like 55% human, 10% elf, 10% dwarf, so on and so forth for each of the races being divided like that. In the north, no such kind of dichotomization exists because there's so much interbreeding between the races that you'll end up with somebody who's like a third human, 2/4 elf, and whatever the remainder of orc.
How does Caliph receive news of the outside world, if at all?
Through travelers that are passing by. Caliph is smack in the middle of a trade route that goes between Nuvarin and Verid. Nuvarin, of course, being the massive wizard college built from the remains of an ancient or of an older dwarven civilization, partially built into a mountain and with a trail going down the mountain to the cliff where there is a sort of dock. That's Nuvarin in a nutshell. Because of that, a lot of people in Verid and farther north will commission things from the Wizarding College as some of the brightest scholars of the ages in the kingdom have lived there and still function, operate there. In fact, I've said many times to the group at large that one of the first things that you're going to be doing is rescuing an apprentice wizard who's traveling towards Verid and rescuing them from a bandit attack.
Okay. Is the country at war at the time? Is there anyone that's like a primary enemy?
No,
Sort of?
tensions are rising, however. It is believed on both sides that we will soon go to war. However, the king in the north is relatively anti-war, although he does have constituents that he needs to deal with.
Mhm.
So although the final decision is his constituents may have other plans for his longevity if he outright denies a majority ruling.
Is the bandit's name Keith?
It is not. But now there is a bandit somewhere named Keith.
Okay.
And when you run into him, he'll be like, he'll be in the wrong country. You guys will meet him across the border, and he's like, "Man, this is a great land to be a part of. Long live whatever the name of this kingdom is." And he'll be like, "That's across the border," and he's like, "Everywhere is this place. It's the same mass of land.
I claim this.
Claim this in the name of the Southern Kingdom." Like, you have no authority to do so. Doesn't matter.
Stick a flag in the land.
I'm a sovereign citizen.
So we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, and we've deviated into some amount of world building. So I'll take a couple of more questions that y'all need answered before the first session, or that you just have a relative curiosity of. Because past this point, you're going to need to roll skill checks for half of this shit.
For half of what shit?
anything you want to learn.
Is religion controlled in the kingdom, and if so, like how is it? Are you only allowed to worship specific gods, or are they pretty like do whatever you want?
The deities in this campaign are going to have a more solid presence in the material plane than in most of your other average D&D campaigns. The patron deity system, you can have up to 3 patron deities, and I will be secretly keeping up with piety, where your character stands amongst the pantheon that they ascribe to. I'll be keeping up with that on a secret table hidden from your eyes. So at some point, and because they will be having a more solid, palpable effect on the throughout the campaign, your piety and who you worship is going to have a more pronounced effect. For example, if you worship, if you have a good rate of level of piety with the deity of war, Halas, occasionally, and most of this is going to happen behind the scenes, you may hit an enemy with an attack roll that does not beat their AC.
Interesting.
So it's small things like that. There will be palpable
very
benefits, but I will be doing, except in certain situations, I'll be doing my best to not have the players notice the effects of their patron deities.
Mm-hmm.
Because 9 times out of 10, you would not notice a deity moving things around.
Yeah.
So
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
but that's one of the most notable instances wherein everybody else has failed to hit this guy on a 19, but you hit on a 17. Right. So
Can't
to that
explain
end,
that.
I will need to emphasize more in combat. Tell me the number, not whether or not you think you hit or miss. You will tell me that number.
That's really interesting. I'm still trying to wrap my head around like this classless thing. It's going to be. I'm really looking forward to digging into this.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time. I hope to really stretch my GM legs with this one. I'm excited to see where it goes. We are at an hour 58, so this is going to be about where we call it. Last question, if anybody has one.
I'm good.
How are we going to start?
We will start next week, and I will have an answer for you then.
Okay.
So, next session, next week, 6 o'clock. If you could show up between then and 5:30 to do a sound check, that would be marvelous. Don and I covered food this week. So first, I will ask for volunteers to cover food next week for the group. If there is not a volunteer, I will delegate.
Okay.
Oh, I suppose I should have mentioned that in the session debriefing of we rotate dinner so that everybody is.
Not always one person doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But regardless, when it is your turn for food duty, you bring the grub, and preferably in the form of main and side. But if you want to just say fuck it and go for pizza, that's also fine. As long as people are getting fed and you're not giving people stuff that they're allergic to.
Any allergies?
No, not
Nope.
really.
No.
Aside
I'm
from
allergic to peanuts, seafood.
yeah, Wesley is also allergic to seafood,
But not nuts.
All of seafood.
shellfish.
It's enough of them to where my allergist said, just don't eat anything that comes from there. It's like
Eat nothing that comes from the ocean.
like technically not fish, but wherever they like make fish stuff, they make like shellfish stuff.
So you'd be, for example, you'd be all right going to one of my family's fish fries where they just fry up a bunch of catfish.
I'd be fine.
But you would not be fine going to a seafood restaurant.
No, that would be unwise.
Mhm.
And peanuts is a big thing.
Oh,
I can't think of any peanut-based dishes that I make. Plenty of desserts, but
It basically means I need to like stay away from Vietnamese cuisine and a good bit of Thai cuisine.
Yeah.
But would it surprise you that it doesn't come up too often around here anyway?
no, not
It
really.
doesn't surprise me.
So,
All right.
You just happen to live in there.
So with that,
Where
we
it
are
just doesn't happen that
just
much.
over the
Yeah.
2-hour mark, so we're going to call it there. Thanks
Okay.
for tuning in, Brandon and Willow. Lovely having you guys in the audience. I look forward to Taylor waves.
Excuse me.
All right.
On wave.
Have a good evening, and
Kitty.
roll well in the future. Good night.
Believe in the hurt of the dice.
Live in the heart of the dice.